I'm having one of those moments thinking, what am I doing here? And I'm not really sure sometimes. When I was asked to first do the TED Talk, I thought, oh, it's not something I really want to do, I don't think. And then they said it was going to take 15 or 20 hours prep work, and I thought, no, that's really not something I want to do. Because like most of you, I don't have much spare time. But I had a couple more conversations, decided that it probably would be a bit of a challenge for me, because I usually could talk underwater, but this had to be a bit more disciplined, and that was going to be the challenge. And then I thought, well, what do I talk about that people would find interesting? My family? They're fabulous, of course. I'm actually an orphan. It took me a long while to work out that that was the case, even though both my parents died 22 years ago, 17 weeks apart. And I remember thinking, after Mum died, she was the last to go, I'm an orphan, what does that mean? How does my world change? And that might be some of you in the audience too, but it does change. Then I thought, my dogs, 2 Labradors, Shadwell and Lofty, 16 and 12, both gorgeous. And they've been my mental health program probably for all of their lives. And the dogs before that did the same purpose. And I could talk about them for 7 to 9 minutes. You'd be bored stiff, but I could still do it. And then I thought about, why do I do what I do? What am I passionate about? And I decided that I'm actually passionate about people. And I thought back across my working life, and I've always worked in direct contact with people. Started out nursing, worked in social work, worked in energy, worked in financial counselling, and now training and consulting. But I've had the real privilege to sit and talk to lots of people who have been particularly vulnerable. And it's a real privilege to hear their stories. So let me tell you one. Just pretend you work with an energy or water or gas company or a debt collector or a bank, someone who collects money on behalf of a product. And you call someone and they say, oh, sorry, I can't talk, I'm overseas. What are you thinking? They're overseas, you're kidding me. And then they say, look, call me back. So you do, you call them back in about a week. And they say, oh, look, I can't talk to you, I'm on my way to a funeral. What are you thinking about them now? So you call back in another week and they say, oh, I can't talk, I'm in hospital. Anyone formulating any ideas about this consumer yet? Remembering you work in one of these businesses? So you do call back, 4th time, and they say, oh, look, I'm on my way to a funeral. And they think, you've used that one before. Fancy. This person must have terrible luck, mustn't they? Anyway, you do call back. And when you call back, they say, look, really, I can't talk to you now. My relationship of 30 years has just ended and I don't know what money I've got. But when I sort it out, I'll call you. New strategy, maybe? So they do call you and they say, look, I know I said I'd call you and I said I'd sort out the financial stuff, but I've got shingles. Can't talk. Too painful. So what are you thinking about all this? Remember, you've made the call to collect the money that was duly owed and overdue. I could run a bit of a poll and get you to call it out, but we haven't got that long, not 7 to 9 minutes, remember? Whatever you're thinking about this person, you're actually thinking it about me. All this happened in 6 weeks. I get quite emotional. 6 weeks, 2 deaths, a relationship, hospitalisation, shingles. And sorry fellas, but for the women, shingles is worse than childbirth. Shocking. Absolutely shocking. But is anyone interested in the backstory to all that? Yeah? The backstory is I'm overseas. I actually had to go. My sister and her husband were on a cruise. And he collapsed and was airlifted off and subsequently died. So as soon as he took sick, I went to where they were and had to bring him back and her back And that was the funeral I had to plan. And the second call I got was actually in the car on the way to the funeral. Obviously, I couldn't talk. Crazy. And 7 days later, I'm in Canberra. Some of you in the audience were actually at this event where I was about to present at a conference about energy and energy efficiency. And I had a massive heart attack. Very ceremoniously got carried out of the building. Don't wear a dress. Just in case. So the call was from intensive care. Sorry, can't talk, in hospital. My sister and son drove to Canberra, picked me up, brought me back. And the day we arrived back, 1st of April, April Fool's Day, my best friend of a lifelong had died and I was their power of attorney. And I had another funeral to plan. And then I said my relationship concluded. Death and dying does things to you. It gets you to think about what's important and what your focus is. And I know that a lot of you would be thinking in your life when that's happened, sometimes you change direction, sometimes you consolidate what you're doing. Really important lessons in life. And then shingles, oh my goodness, as a result of stress. What a surprise. 6 weeks, remember? So always having worked with vulnerable consumers, this was a bit of a shock for me. I knew it intellectually. I'd studied financial deprivation and financial counselling. I understood what it meant. And I'd always advocated around vulnerability, and for those who work in industries and in the consumer sector would know that I've been talking about these sorts of things for many years now. Completely different. You know, I wonder when we're at our absolute worst, we don't make decisions and we can't make decisions. You know, I was really interested in the session yesterday about trauma. You just can't move forward. And then if things continue to happen to you, even more so. I mean, my sister needed to move in and look after me and tell me what to eat and what to wear and which pills to take. I couldn't remember if I'd fed the dogs. But Marg, 2 weeks ago, had to bury her husband at that time. I actually was calling her Nurse Ratchet by this time. She was a fantastic gatekeeper. No one got in to see me, and if they did, they got 15 minutes and then shuffled out the door. But Marg says that this was an incredibly difficult time for her, where she felt numb. But then she adds, but at least I got to be the boss. And apparently that's unusual. Don't know. So I want to come back to the point about when people are least able to make decisions, we want them to. And we want them to commit to things, and we want them to commit to payments and actions. And they simply don't have the ability. It took me a long time to regain some stability in my life. You know, here I am, almost 61, very excited to be nearly 61 because I didn't think I'd get here. And as I said, it changes the way you think and the things you do and why you do what you do. And for me, it was about reinforcing that this was such an important area of work that we needed to work on. So if you were the collector or the business that was talking to me as a consumer, have you got the policies or programs or support available that could have assisted me? Because the story is actually not about me. It's about what happens when. And if it was someone you know and love, what would you have wanted to happen? What sort of support or latitudes would you have expected? You know, I often think about, I've got fantastic family, I've got amazing friends, I've got great colleagues. What would have happened if I didn't have those things, as so many of the families I've worked with don't have? What would have happened? It would be so easy to see a completely different world. You know, people would say things to me like, oh, Sue, what doesn't kill you will make you stronger. Really? Nearly did. It nearly killed me. Or another particular favourite was things like, oh, Sue, I completely understand. Truly. I hear businesses say that to consumers, oh, we understand. And I think, pig's arse you do. Don't even pretend. And another of my favourites was something like, oh, it's all character building. And I'd think, how much character does any one person need, really? You know, I know that it was all best intent. I don't question that for a minute. But when you are vulnerable, you hear things in a different way. And words are so important in relation to that. You know, it is a privilege to be here. Literally, to be here. It is a privilege to work with people. But in my line of work, I talk to consumers almost on a weekly basis still, even though my work is in training and consulting, because I need to understand what the issues are. But I think there's a responsibility when we're put in that position and that privilege to hear the stories, we need to do something with it. And let's hope that we all do.